true.
Hello, people of YouTube.
Whoa, chill out, man.
Hello.
Nope. All right. Say hi, Tina.
Hey, Tina.
That's Rebecca, Joey's wife. We're live on YouTube and Facebook right now. We're about to start a talk on digestion and poop. Want to join in?
Ooh, I like to talk about poop. Enjoy, you guys.
Thank you. All right, I think we are live. Let me just triple check everywhere and make sure that we're good. Hello, people of the internet and various other places tuning in right now. We are about to start a discussion on something everybody does every single day.
Or at least you should.
You know, I wrestled in middle school, and there was a kid who told me that he pooped once a week, and I was blown away.
Mm-hmm. You were like literally blown away. That's the thing. Like, you can make so many jokes out of poop. You know what I mean? Like, there's just like so many things you could say.
I hope we get through all of them today. I would like everybody to take a moment and view my Precious Moments figurines that I have behind me.
Beautiful.
I hope you enjoy them. They'll be there the whole time. I do have some more in front of me that I may be gazing off and looking at while I discuss poop this morning. So, hello everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining in. We are here with registered dietitian and nutritionist and all over good person and expert Rebecca Daoud. She is going to be taking us through the next, what do you think, 20, 30 minutes?
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about a very important part of your life that people only like to joke about but not really talk about, and that's moving your bowels, taking a dump, pooping, all that good stuff together. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rebecca, and I'm going to hang out.
So, hello everybody, Rebecca here. I personally love talking about poop. I think that when you can talk about poop with someone, you've become very close. It kind of creates this special bond when you talk about poop with each other, right? Because it's just like what Dan said. Everybody does it. If you're not doing it most of the days out of the week, then it's important that you talk to your doctor, your gastroenterologist, so you can figure out what's going on. And in this conversation, I'll be addressing, diarrhea, constipation, things like that. And that's pretty exciting stuff.
I'm not going to stop doing that. Sorry. It's just
no, please. I want you to do like the whole eyes open, like, oh my God, whoa. And if you have any poop jokes, please drop them like in the comment box, because I love reading them. I genuinely get a kick out of seeing it. And even if you want to like drop the emoji, that poop emoji, which is like the greatest thing ever, please do that as well. I know we can all use a little bit of humor during these times. So feel free. Yes.
Poop talk. Let's go.
Poop talk. Here we go. So a little bit about the digestive tract. So I want to open this conversation up with just understanding the GI tract, also known as the gastrointestinal tract, and just to kind of have a little bit understanding as to what it is. So there are a couple portions within the GI tract. We have the upper GI, which contains the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the duodenum, which is the first portion of the small intestine. And then we have the lower GI, which is the jejunum, the ileum, the colon, the rectum, and the anus. And then we have accessory digestive organs, which include salivary glands, the pancreas, the gallbladder, and the liver. And so these accessory organs, they work with the other parts of the GI tract indirectly rather than directly. And I'll kind of explain what that means, because this is a very complex system. And so I just want to break it down easily so that you kind of understand, what it is. And every time I see my clients, I like to really talk about the digestive tract because it tells us a lot of what's going on inside, right? And how you're doing in there. So just to kind of get further into digestion. So digestion starts in the mouth and it starts with mastication. So that means basically chewing. And that's how we break down our carbohydrates. So an enzyme called salivary amylase breaks down these components. And then when you start chewing, that's where your digestion, again, that's where it starts. That's where it starts. And from the mouth, then you start swallowing, goes through the esophagus. And then from there, we get into the stomach. And then after going through the stomach, we get into the small intestine, which again is comprised of the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. And then from there, we get into the large intestine where a bolus is made so that further, you can then poop, right? Essentially, that's what happens.
Yay!
and then again, we have those accessory digestive organs such as the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. And so when we talk about those accessory organs, like the pancreas, we secrete certain enzymes to really help break down your food components. So to break down carbohydrates, we use amylase, which is an enzyme. To break down fats, we use what's called lipase. And that's an enzyme to break down fats. And to break down proteins, there's an enzyme called proteases. And so, like I said, the digestive tract is very complex. And so if you want to explore a little bit more, feel free to reach out. But that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how digestion works. Also, fun fact, your small intestine is about 20 feet long, which is pretty big. So a lot of stuff is going on in there and you have no idea because you could just be going into Disney World and just going on some rides, woo! And, meanwhile, you just ate a hot dog and then you're like, oh my God, whoa, I don't feel good. So, we don't really know something is up until something is actually coming up, right? And that's also part of the whole digestive tract as well. So it's really important that we keep a balance when we talk about our GI tract. And so before we kind of get into keeping that balance, there's a couple things that I do want to talk about. One is diarrhea. So, Dan, here's a question for you. When I say the word diarrhea, what comes to mind? Like, what does that mean to you?
Cha-cha-cha.
Yeah.
Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha.
Yeah. Cha-cha-cha. Is that like the sound of
The
it?
diarrhea song? How could you not know the diarrhea song?
Wait, how does it go?
Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha.
Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha. Yeah.
When it's running down your leg.
Cha-cha-cha. Oh my God, okay, so running down your leg, that's diarrhea. Yeah, okay. That could definitely be.
That's what pops to mind, okay?
Okay, fair enough.
We're talking about this for hours. I mean, really.
Right. So diarrhea is when you have loose or watery stools at least 3 times per day, right? So if you have, there's acute and then there's chronic diarrhea. And so usually diarrhea tends to resolve on its own within a couple of days, whether if you're having, if you've had food poisoning or maybe there's some sort of intolerance that you've had. Again, if you have any questions about that, you can always feel free to message me and we can explore more. But diarrhea essentially is when you have those 3 watery or loose bowel movements at least 3 times per day. And then on the other hand, we have constipation. So constipation, Dan, what is constipation? Cha-cha-cha. There's no cha-cha-cha.
Nothing good. I've got a really great story about from when I used to tour, like literally the only time when I was constipated. Columbus, Ohio was the city that did it to me every time. Every time I'd go through Columbus, Ohio, I would get constipated. I missed a whole Star Wars movie in a movie theater because I was constipated and finally in Columbus, Ohio. I spent like 45 minutes on the toilet. Horrible.
Wow.
Never had it again, but it was...
But how long did you go without having a bowel movement?
Like 2 or 3 days, which is very abnormal for me.
Mm-hmm.
And was just like, oh man, this is bad. It was usually like around anxiety or something like that, the travel and having to perform and set up and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
For
I was
some
gonna
for some reason, Columbus, Ohio, that's what comes to mind.
Right. And that's interesting because it's like your body knows, right? So it's like, your body knows you're hitting that certain point and then you get anxious and then it's like your body just stops. It just pauses. So it has this preconceived idea, what's going to happen. And then your body responds to that, right? And so constipation is that response. It's the same with traveling. Some people, you have what's called traveler's diarrhea, and that can occur. And then sometimes people get constipated when they travel, right? It's like this anxiety where, yeah, me too. Hey, I'm with you on that. Always as a kid, I just hard time, and it happens. So when we talk about constipation, it's when you don't have a bowel movement for 3 or less bowel movements per week. Really, that's what that means. So no bowel movements for at least 3 times or 3 or less times per week. And it's really important to explore when you're not having a bowel movement. And again, we'll get into some tips on how to relieve that and to, try to prevent constipation. So when we talk about poop, right, and we talk about diarrhea, we talk about constipation, we talk about stool, there's what's called the Bristol stool chart. And I can share this with you guys if you haven't heard it before, you've never seen this chart, you can even Google it. But basically the Bristol stool chart is very helpful in understanding your stool, right, and what your bowel movement looks like. So I definitely do recommend that every time you use the toilet that you look at your stool and just kind of get an idea of how it looks, the shape of it, the color of it, the size of it. And, it's.
Do I get to know its personality or anything?
You can talk to it. Oh, that's really funny. So the Bristol stool chart, it's comprised of 7 different characteristics. And so when you look at the chart, you ideally want to be around a 3 or a 4. What that means is basically like a sausage-like type of stool. So you don't want it to be hard or clumpy because that's usually a sign of constipation. And you also don't want it to be, ragged at edges or, flaky or even very loose because that's a sign of diarrhea, right? So that's when you've gone too quickly. So we want to stay around a 3 or a 4. So that just kind of gives you an idea about the Bristol stool chart. So once now that we have a pretty much of a general idea of, digestion, how it works, a little bit of a background, your small intestine, your large intestine, your poop, I want to talk a little bit about the microbiome because that's actually my favorite part of, just this overall idea of the digestive tract and how fascinating the microbiome is. Dan, have you ever heard of the microbiome?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And what do you know about the microbiome, or what are some things that you've read or you've heard or anything?
It's basically the atmosphere of your gut and the balance of bacteria.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And this is extremely fascinating because this is such an emerging and, such an evolving topic that we are, exploring, and there's a lot of research on it, and it's something that's just really evolving and we're learning new things about it. So the microbiome, there are trillions of bacteria in the gut, and we have more than 100,000 billion microorganisms or bacteria, and that's 10 to 100 times more than the human cells. Okay, so this is like a completely different DNA, like just something completely different, and your microbiome is different than my microbiome. We are both extremely different. We will not respond the same way to certain things. It's just comprised of, different bacteria essentially. So the microbiome in that sense is extremely fascinating. And so the human gut, or also known as the microbiota, it's individualized, and it starts during infancy, and things such as antibiotics, your dietary choices, and your lifestyle can all contribute to your microbiome. So it's it helps diversify it. So your food helps the community of the microbiome to diversify that flora or that bacteria. And then things like medications, like antibiotics, that can also kill some of the flora or the bacteria. And also just in general, your lifestyle choices, like your environment, your stress and things like that, that can all contribute to a healthy microbiome, essentially. So getting into the stress, right? Because that is a huge psychological component. It's known that the gut-brain axis, and Dan, have you ever heard of the gut-brain axis before?
I have, but please tell me more.
Yeah. So the gut-brain axis, or the gut-brain and the brain-gut, it's bidirectional. And so what that means is that there's such a huge psychological component when it comes to the communication between the brain and the gut. And so what happens is when there's a disconnect between the two, we start seeing a lot of different issues, right? And so that's why when there's stress, sometimes people, like for instance, let's say you have a huge exam coming up within the next couple of days, perhaps your bowel movements are going to increase. Some people experience diarrhea, right? They feel that nervousness. Or on the flip end, some people, like when you get stressed out, like your trip when you're in Columbus, Ohio, you don't go at all, right? And so that's where we say that there's this gut-brain axis, this communication, where we know that there's such a huge psychological component in the health of your microbiome. And that's where we're really trying to explore more into that, which I think is extremely fascinating. And we also have seen, or, there are some studies that have shown that the gut-brain axis is involved in certain neurological disorders such as Parkinson's disease, and that's something very fascinating too, just to kind of understand how that's all coordinated with one another. So when we talk about, just the microbiome and the diet and things like that, that's kind of where I come into play. So, I do talk about stress with my clients and patients, but because, the stress is a large portion of that is psychological, it's very important that somebody who has that stress speaks to a therapist. And since that's a little bit out of my scope, I really focus more on the nutrition aspect. So how do we maintain this healthy microbiome, right? How do we have optimal digestion? And really what it comes down to is, for me, I take a very individualistic approach because everybody is so different. So whatever I tell you, Dan, or recommend for you based on your own lifestyle will be completely different from somebody else, from, my husband, from Joey, right? Or from a really good friend of mine. Completely different. But there are some overall, general guidelines that can help incorporate this healthy microbiome. And some of those things include increasing your fiber intake. So we know that fiber, when we think of fiber, we think of poop, right? So remember that, when you look at that Bristol stool chart, we want around a 3 or a 4, which is like that sausage-like stool. And so fiber, what it does is it helps slowly release that stool, right? And so it helps create that form, it creates that bulk. And that's what you want in your stool. You want that bulk. And so, some things that are high in fiber, what are some things that you can tell me that are high in fiber?
Oh, I was just eating some spinach, lot of broccoli, asparagus, apples.
Yep.
Fruits and vegetables, man. That's the good stuff. If you can get your fiber from fruits and vegetables, amen.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about fiber is, at least for so many years, I've always correlated fiber and poop, because it helps you go, and it helps maintain that healthy microflora. And so just to kind of take it a step further, fiber is not digested well in our small intestine. It's actually not digested at all. And so what happens is it goes straight into the large intestine, and it creates these prebiotics for our colon. It creates that good bacteria for our colon to feed on. And so, I know we've heard of prebiotics and probiotics, and a lot of times we think of the supplemental form, but really we can get these prebiotics from our foods, which is actually even more beneficial because then you're getting the other nutrients that are involved in these prebiotic foods. And so you actually named a bunch of prebiotic foods when you were just saying the high fibrous foods. So things like artichoke, like Jerusalem artichoke, is a great prebiotic vegetable. Another one is banana. Banana is a great prebiotic fruit. Garlic, onion, leeks, asparagus, right? So what happens is because these foods are not digested well, they create what's called short chain fatty acids. And those short chain fatty acids, an example would be butyrate, which maybe you've heard before, butyrate. But it's a prebiotic basically. And so again, these feed on our colon, and it's very beneficial to our microbiome because it's that good bacteria. And so that just basically gives you some examples as to why you want to increase your fiber intake. The other thing is, and this is just another example of some ways to maintain a healthy gut, would be to decrease your red meat consumption. So does this mean to not eat red meat? No, it doesn't mean that at all. And it's not just because of the cholesterol content, but another thing about red meat is that it is very hard to digest red meat, and it creates certain components. This is a little bit of a tricky word, but the abbreviation is TMAO, and that stands for trimethylamine N oxide. And this component really, it's known for being pro-atherogenic, or what we've heard of atherosclerosis, right? And so that's why we've heard, okay, red meat is not good in excess because it can contribute to high cholesterol. And it's specifically from that component. So not only does it cause that, but it can also be hard on the digestive process. And so does it mean, again, to not have any? No, because meat also has great sources of iron, and it can also provide other essential nutrients as well. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea with that. The other component is you want to reduce your consumption of omega-6 fatty acids. So we've heard that omega-6, maybe some of you have, some of you haven't, but omega-6 fatty acids are actually pro-inflammatory, and omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. So you want to incorporate more omega-3 fatty acids. So things coming from your salmon, your mackerel, your herring, your sardines, your walnuts, your chia seeds, right? So all these foods are anti-inflammatory. So not only do they help, from numerous ways with your heart health, but also with your digestive tract. So it helps really decrease that inflammation. Omega-6 fatty acids, on the other hand, like I was saying, can increase inflammation. So foods that are high in omega-6 include things like sunflower seeds, safflower oil, corn oil, right? So those are some of the examples. And usually those are found in chips, and sometimes even in products that have been used with certain oils, like I was saying, the safflower oil. So you just want to be a little bit cautious of that. Again, doesn't mean that you should not have it at all. No, it just means to just be a little mindful, right? Keeping a balance, because that's really what it all comes down to. Another really important note that I want to make is that when we talk about the microbiome, eating the same foods every single day is also not recommended for your microbiome, because your microbiome wants diversity. It wants a community of different components, different things. So you don't want to have the same thing every single day. So switch up your foods. And that's why I'm saying, with the red meat, do you want to not have it at all and get rid of it? No. So, and then the fourth thing, another thing that I, definitely recommend you guys doing is to reduce your salt intake. So consuming a high sodium diet, not only is it bad for hypertension, or perhaps can lead to chronic kidney disease, but again, a high salt diet has also been shown to be very stressful on the stomach mucosa, which is a protective layer. And when it damages that mucosa or that layer, it can actually lead to complications with your stomach, which we definitely want to avoid. So my recommendation is usually to have around less than 2,300 milligrams per day of salt. And if you kind of want a little bit of an idea of how much that is, 1 teaspoon of salt is around 2,300 milligrams. So you want to shoot for way less than that. Usually around 1,500 is good. And then my other suggestion as far as keeping a healthy microbiome, Dan, is exercise. So exercise is also very important for the microbiome. Why is that? Because we were talking about that brain gut axis. It helps alleviate that stress. So indirectly, it helps relieve that stress, which therefore is helpful for the microbiome. It's good for your digestion, etc. And last but not least, another component that I definitely recommend as far as, maintaining gut integrity is having a good amount of sleep. So shooting for anywhere between 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. It's very, very important. And also always water. I always end all my recommendations with water. So increase your water consumption because, of course, we know that with water, that helps with movement, it helps with flow. So if you are suffering from constipation, you know that when you're eating fiber, you want to increase your water intake, right? And then that way we can create that bulk and easier stool will come out. So those are just some little tips, a couple of tips to help you guys out with maintaining a healthy microbiome. Yay! Dan, do you have any questions or is there anything that I could kind of further explore or help answer? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let's go.
No, I was just going to say, because, something that's pretty common that I've, because I do specialize in conditions like irritable bowel syndrome. And it's very common, right? So, prior to having these poop conversations, nobody really talks about their poop. They just kind of keep it on the hush hush. But now it's like we're really talking about it. And I see people, coming to me saying, hey, I've been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, or, I think I have some sort of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or maybe some leaky gut or intestinal permeability. So there's all these different conditions that we're still kind of exploring, but they're really common. And so it's interesting because people are really talking more about their poop and their gut issues.
It's something that people don't always feel comfortable talking about. I was thinking about this coming up and I remembered wondering for a long time, what happens to all that? What happens to all that feces? Where does it go? There's a great documentary that Vice put out called You Don't Know Shit. And I highly recommend that everybody watch it. It's a trip. It's really great. It just follows the whole process from start to finish and what we're doing with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And,
so what do they talk about and you don't know shit?
They talk about, I believe it's somewhere I believe it's New York City. It might be part of upper New York State, how they process sewage, right?
Like, where does it go once everything's dumped out?
Yeah. What do we do with it? Everybody's doing this every single day.
Right.
No, I don't think I have any questions. He provided an amazing amount of information and I just learned a bunch of stuff.
So. Cool. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I'm really happy to hear that. And, there's a lot of resources. And, if you're somebody who, suffers from increased motility, because I do hear that, I mean, both constipation and diarrhea are very common conditions. And we know that through our nutrition, we could definitely alleviate some of these symptoms, whether it be through a low FODMAP diet. And it's not, and when I say the word diet, it's not this diet that you're on forever. It's just something to understand your symptoms. It's your symptoms basically saying, hey, I need a little help right now. So it's nothing permanent. It's medical nutrition therapy. And, there are some things that we can do to help alleviate, the diarrhea, the constipation, ways to, and even if you don't experience these type of symptoms, there are still some things that, you can do to just overall maintain a healthy gut, which I think is very important. Yeah.
Hyper important. Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we're going to end the live stream right now. If you have any further questions, drop them in the comments and either myself or Rebecca will reach out to you. And that is it. We will be back here again on all platforms in 2 weeks. Rebecca, if you want to hang tight for a minute, let me end
Cool.
this.
Thank you guys. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm